there's a microphone right there to catch the last gurgles, and Technicolor to photograph the red swollen tongue.
Hey, Vern.
Future events such as these
Angling?
will affect you in the future.
Damn you, Rabbit! You smell like fucking piss!
You're watching The Projectors.
Hell yeah!
A film fan program discussing a variety of movies from history and around the world.
What do you think of this boner I got?
Featuring your hosts, Bob Sham.
When you're Scandinavian, flopping out your mommy milkers is nothing.
And Angela.
If they were just gun perverts, this would be fine. Party!
Thank you for selecting The Projectors.
I want French pancakes like at IHOP.
And now a preview of our film discussion.
Lusty Men. Meet them, thrill to them. The rough, rugged nerve of iron guys who play the roughest game on earth. Men who ride hard, play hard, love hard in the brawling camps of big-time rodeo.
Please help me.
How?
Get him away from here. It's his only chance. It's my only chance.
When Wes first said to me, let's go in together, maybe I told myself it was the money that was making up my mind, but it wasn't. The thing that kept me stringing along was you.
$400 for 2 minutes work. That's the...
If it was that easy, every rodeo hand would be rich.
Well, they pay you for the chances you take. I want that ranch.
Well, so do I, but what good's the ranch going to be if you're crippled?
How do you want it, hot or cold?
As long as it's clean.
Hot this way, cold that way.
Thanks.
Anytime your plumbing don't work, just call McLeod.
Judging a horse like judging a woman, you can't ever tell by the head of their mane. Know the girl once had one of the prettiest faces you ever seen. But she's so bow-legged, a hog run between her legs, not even graze, neither one of them.
Ain't that pretty? Out here in the corridor playing post office.
Somebody's going to get real fed up with you and beat your head in with a rake handle.
Who, your friend?
That could be.
Be the first thing you ever did on your own since I knew you. All you've been doing is dragging your foot in my stirrup.
You got anything to say to me, say it down at the stables.
Playing me for a sucker. Taking half my dough. Why? Because you ain't got guts enough to ride yourself. You're yellow.
Hello. It's still January. I don't need to do the introductions. I do not. But it is a little awkward. I need to come up with some kind of conversational thing. Like a Seinfeldian type conversation where we're talking about Cracker Jack.
What's the deal
Yeah.
with Cracker Jacks?
He's mad at that because he's like, people think I say what's the deal all the time. I rarely do, but
Doesn't matter.
I'm being told what's the deal all the time. Imagine having a show where you're the least funny guy on it, right? This month we're doing our theme of 5 directors, and each week we discuss several movies from a different point in certain directors' careers. And this week is a loaded one. And I have so much fun booking these. But then the time comes, and if I fall behind, it's a little like, fuck. We're kind of watching a lot of these movies. For the holidays leading into the new year, I'm literally editing down videos that are dropping like tomorrow. And it's like, oh, we really need to get ahead. And it's hard to, when I get so excited in the past, booking all these movies I want to see. But this week, Nicholas Ray, 1952 to 1956. I got into Nicholas Ray when we did our noir month, talking about They Live by Night and In a Lonely Place. In a Lonely Place becoming one of my favorite movies. And there's just something about this guy. And he is, of course, well regarded when you look back onto film history. But there's still something about Nicholas Ray's filmography that feels very deep cut. Like, his famous movie is Rebel Without a Cause, which we will discuss this week. that movie was huge for on a cultural level, putting James Dean on that zeitgeist where he still lingers to this day. But a movie that we're talking about today, The Lusty Men, it's not one you ever hear casually come up. And this guy worked his ass off from when he started to the end. Seemed like he did 2 movies a year a lot of the time. For 1952 to 1956, there's only one movie in that span of time we're not talking about. And it's a James Cagney Western. And we've already got 2 Westerns this week. So I opted to... It came between the James Cagney movie and a movie called Hot Blood, which might be the most deep cut fucking movie we discuss all month. So I picked Hot Blood. To start the week off, we are discussing the film The Lusty Men from 1952, directed by Nicholas Ray, written by Horace McCoy, Dave Dortort, and Claude Stanish. Claude Stanish wrote some article in a magazine, I think. You would read half a Life magazine article, like say in 1948. Oh, that was a nice Life magazine article. A studio would be like, let's make a whole movie out of this short story in a Life magazine article. Like, that would happen all the fucking time, right? Yes, The Lusty Men, written by those guys, starring a smoking ass Susan Hayward, Robert Mitchum, who is one of our dogs, Arthur Kennedy, Arthur Honeycutt, cinematography by Lee Garms, music by Roy Webb from RKO Radio Pictures.
This movie came out in 1951. It was being made in 51,
Sure.
probably. And so it came out in 52, smack dab in the middle of the Hays Code. And this movie is pretty racy for that time.
It does come off very spicy, yeah.
1951 was an interesting year for the Hays Code because the MPAA voted to put more restrictions on it. And what I can't find right now is that there were some people and studio heads who fought against that by doing the very damnedest they could to ride that line to just not get in trouble because it was the amount of rules that were being put upon them.
It was
this
stupid.
was like one of the first movies that came out after they tried to make it more strict. And this is one of the risque movies from that whole period.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way too. It does have some Hays Code era trappings, but also does feel like it's trying to expand that as well.
They push it pretty far.
And it's important to note that each state had their own type of authority on what they could or couldn't allow in a movie, some more strict than others. The Hays Code just became this blanket one that could work throughout the whole country, and it just became this default thing to where it's just easier to get your movie made if you follow it under the Hays Code banner. That way you're like, well, they'll let me do this in, say, Oregon, but if you want it to be, you don't just want it to be shown in Oregon, do you? No one's trying to do that with their movie, right?
And what this ultimately evolved into is the rating system that we currently have, where this group of people sits in a room and previews movies and decides, oh, well, if you take out like these 3 shots of boobs, then you can make it an R rating. But if you don't, it's like an NC-17 or not rated. You know, there are still people who are trying to police what you see in movies, even though so very much more gets by now.
You know what's really dumb about the Hays Code, and we've seen that in several movies in which there's a bit of a love triangle going on. And yeah, we sometimes see characters accusing other characters in these older movies of trying to get with their wife or steal their lady or whatever. But oftentimes the love triangles will be only the audience seems to be in on the feelings, because there's that anti-infidelity rule with the Hays Code, which is so stupid. Sometimes even the characters in the movie behave as though we're all following the strict, like, the unspoken rules of the Hays Code, to where they would never assume that that something would go against the unspoken rules that are in place. Like, their characters don't assume that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes characters will not assume that their wife is falling in love or has feelings for another character.
Because in this celluloid world, no one does that.
Yeah.
No one does it.
Which is, we touched base on that with the dumb assumption that everyone is always celibate before marriage. But they never, like, explain that, because the onus on the audience to understand it. So if you're like, well, how come they didn't just cheat there? Like, it seemed like, well, because there's a Hays Code thing, and half the people probably back then didn't even know the rules of it then. It's all just bullshit that contradicted itself. But The Lusty Men is a really good movie I liked a lot. And it's also a very informative movie. It is a rodeo movie that actually takes the time to explain the culture and what certain things of the rodeo is.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most thrilling and surely one of the most dangerous of all rodeo events. Cowboys riding their wild Brahma bulls. Unlike the bucking horse used in rodeos, who will try to prevent stepping on or kicking a rider, the Brahma bull will purposely stomp a contestant with his sharp hoofs or rip the rider with his horns, oftentimes causing fatal injuries. The Brahma bulls you see here are all well known for their mean dispositions and are particularly treacherous because they're the only type bull that will charge a man with their eyes open. That is why you'll never see a Brahma bull in the ring with a matador.
You'll be going along following the story of these three people, and then there will be a moment that'll be like, you hear a man announce like, and these are the rules for calf roping, and it's like, wow, it really does seem to have this documenting aspect of trying to really envelop us into this world, this rodeo world. And I think it does a fantastic job of displaying it as a rough and rather dirty place, even under those Hays Code restrictions, you know?
And extremely dangerous.
Yeah, that's like the biggest issue. Like, it has reverence for it, but also the movie appears to be saying, you don't really want to do this.
That's what's so interesting about it. I did love the details they got into, even to the point of explaining how the ropes were supposed to be positioned and what they were holding. That stuff was super fascinating.
The contestants ride the bull holding on to a loose rope, sometimes called the bull rope. The other hand free in the air. Should the cowboy touch the bull with his free hand at any time during his 8-second ride, he will be disqualified. Now keep your eyes on chute number 1.
It is presented, though, as a ladies don't let your babies grow up to be rodeo men. Intoxicating, this life, but these are these daredevil men. It made me think of watching a pro wrestling documentary and hearing someone say, if I didn't do this, I would probably be in jail or dead. These are people who need that rush to the point where even when they're no longer able to do it, they will push themselves to try to do it. And the guys who have been injured and can't ride at the level they did before or rope at the level they did before, we see them falling into gambling and alcoholism. You know, they need something to fill that gap. And there's even people who, there's the little old guy, I can't think of his name, and his daughter. Booker and his little girl. I love those two. It's just such a part of their life that they've figured out a way to still travel around with the rodeo, even though he has not been able to ride for years and years.
We get the Robert Mitchum's character, Jeff McLeod. We see him at a rodeo, and he's being set up. And this movie is full of these interesting camera shots that really helps to set a lot of the Nicholas Ray movies apart from other movies at that time. Like, there's a part where we're being introduced to Jeff, and he's about to ride a bull, and the bull comes into the frame, the shot. It's like right up in the face of the camera. You can see like the bull's nose is probably like just inches away from the camera. And then it pans up, and we see Jeff for the first time just over it or ready to drop onto the bull to do a ride. And there's other great camera shots too. There's one where, Jeff ends up getting injured enough to where he can't really do it anymore. And he goes home and he finds the beat up house that he grew up in. And he thinks no one is there. And there's a great shot of him crawling under the house. And then the camera follows him under the house, and he reaches up and the camera pans to where he's got like his old pistol and some money that he left there a long time ago. And there's other just great moments too. The floor shot of the guy leering at ladies' legs at the party later in the movie. And then that part where when Jeff first meets the Wes Merritt and Louise Merritt characters, and we see Susan Hayward as Louise just watch Jeff and Wes talk while their reflection is on the the truck window.
Yeah,
like these
that's
really,
my favorite.
These really nice, creative, just very these points that just feel so sophisticated and unique for that era. Jeff just about gets his ass shot because there's an old man living in that house, but everyone knows Jeff's family once he explains himself, and he's looking for work and he wants to be a ranch hand.
Wes and his wife live in a house on the ranch only because they're married. All the single men live in bunks together. They have like a big house they live in.
And Jeff gets a job there.
Yeah, but the reason it happens is because he's having coffee with that little old man, and the couple comes up. Wes and his wife come up because they want to buy this house someday. So they come and visit this man all the time, but they cannot afford it. And when Wes hears McLeod's name, he flips out because he loves the rodeo.
He's got to, if you're into the rodeo, you know this guy's name.
Because he's a big, huge star of the rodeo. It has been for years. And so Wes goes up to him and essentially talks him into coming back to the ranch with him. And I'm sure you could get a job. I'll put in a word for you. The guy doesn't like to hire rodeo guys because they don't trust that they'll stay around.
They tend to take off pretty quickly.
He's like, but I'll vouch for you and we'll get you in. And so he does. He gets them a job immediately. Our girl does not like him at all.
There is some lusty men in this movie, but perhaps the lusty men is the men watching this movie when Susan Hayward's on the screen. I think she's a total smoke show in this movie. You were criticizing her eyebrows.
I think she's pretty.
That's rude. Wes wants to get into the rodeo.
Yeah, and he gets McLeod to start teaching him things.
And so Wes wants to do this one little rodeo gig, right? He wants to do this one. And Jeff is, he's not afraid to tell you about his lifestyle, right? Or what it was or where he's at. But you can tell that Jeff is in a different place. Jeff talks about how he won enough money to buy estates and have lost them at crap tables and drinking afterwards. Like, it's all about the lifestyle itself more than just making that money, because he's made fortunes and he's lost fortunes.
But Wes is this young guy who says the only reason he wants to do this is because he wants to make money faster to buy this home with his wife.
His fiscal argument is pretty good because they're having a hard time.
That is true, but her practical argument is also extremely good, wherein what will be the point of a house if you break your neck? And I get that. Her other thing is what she's most afraid of. She's most afraid of him getting hurt. But second to that is, if he really wants to go be a rodeo man, what does that mean for their life? There's a part where she says to him,
"Nobody's getting panicky. I'm just trying to keep us straight. And stop kidding yourself. You ain't the only guy who tried to take me from behind the counter in that hash house and set me up in business. You ain't the biggest. You ain't the strongest. You ain't the richest and you ain't the prettiest. But you're the only one wanted what I wanted. A decent, steady life."
But you were the guy who hit on me, who wanted the same thing as me. You wanted to settle down. You wanted to work the land. You wanted to have your own place. You wanted to have a family. And that's why I'm with you. That's why I fell in love with you, is because I want a simple life with you.
There's one point where he's talking about how broke she was. Like, you were a girl at a tamale shop, and I wanted her to be like, "I like tamales. I like them." Wes does go to this rodeo, and it seems like Wes is starting off trying to bite off a little more than he can chew that Jeff would recommend. But to the surprise of everyone, Wes is actually quite good at it.
And at this point, he is riding horses.
Broncs, yeah.
Broncs, and he is roping calves. And I can't remember if he's doing it yet, but there's another thing that I don't recall ever seeing before.
He does milk a few bulls, too.
Not yet, though. What is it called where they... Shut up. What is it called? You didn't say anything, but you're making that face. What is it called where the two men go out and the one man jumps on the bull and grabs him by the horns?
Bulldogging.
Yeah, bulldogging. So he's doing those things, but he's not getting on a bull yet. But he wins.
That kind of gives him the fever because he immediately tells his wife, who she's happy that she got paid for an amount that would take like months for them to earn that money. And he's like, well, we're going to go out to San Alamo or wherever the fuck, someplace, Texas, New Mexico, whatever.
Yeah, he says, I quit my job and Jeff's coming with us.
Yeah, she's determined to not be some lady at home alone keeping a house by herself. So she says, fine, I'll go with you. Now, it's pretty interesting here. You know, Nicholas Ray is known for utilizing the notions of outsiders in his movies, right? And the settings shift here. You know, rodeoing is tangential to the rural livestock culture that these guys exist in, but there's also all these warnings and distrust of rodeo guys as they wander into the more domestic aspects of these people's life. The guy's worried about hiring them. Susan Hayward's like, look, all due respect, I don't want my husband to be brain damaged and crippled. But then the environment around them changes. And now Susan Hayward, who only wants a life of quiet domesticity, is now going on the rodeo circuit with her husband and her coach. And now she is the weird one. She is the odd one out. That's kind of when the movie most embodies the notion of the lusty men, when she's in this caravan and she's like sleeping in her car and guys are just looking at her like,
nice looking filly.
Yeah. Well quartered up. Looks fast.
Depends on the track.
It depends on the jockey, too.
Get lost.
Howdy.
Morning, ma'am.
But we meet the women in these camp, and certain types of women. There's not many, but one woman she's married to this guy who's been doing it forever, and he's a little off, and he's scarred up, and he is, and she just looks completely world weary and completely done with it.
She says one of the most telling lines when they first get there. Susan Hayward's looking for a place to wash up. They're just in their car and they have a trailer with their one horse. That's all they own. She says to the lady, is there a ladies' room this way? And the woman says, you won't find no ladies' room here, and you won't find no ladies either. She invites her, or she kind of tells her what's going on and who people are, right?
She meets another woman who's like a trick rider who apparently dated Jeff. And
yes.
Jeff just stopped coming around at some point. But they're in a trailer, which is like someone else's trailer or whatever.
It's her trailer.
Yeah.
And it's her trailer, and she tells Susan Hayward, oh, take a shower. Go relax, right? And so Susan's getting ready to take a shower, and the girl leaves. She's like, I'll be right back. Jeff comes in because he's coming around to see this lady that he used to get with. And then there's this very uncomfortable part where they seemingly were butting up against this Hays Code line. He realizes it's her in there, and he starts talking about, you need any help? I'm right here. Just let me know.
How do you want it? Hot or cold?
As long as it's clean.
Hot this way, cold that way.
Thanks.
Anytime your plumbing don't work, just call McLeod.
Wes all right?
Yeah, he's all right. He's over at Booker's resting. Got a big day coming up. Hey, you're real little with your shoes off.
You're real little with your shoes on. Rosemary's tall. She's more your type.
Rosemary's nice, but Little's nice, too.
Then she gets in the shower, and one of the head guys of the rodeo comes over who's dating the lady that owns the trailer. We find out because they get married later. But he comes in, and right when he's coming in, you hear her go, Jeff, will you hand me a towel?
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Scandalous.
Because she's in the shower.
But Jeff,
he's going to get a towel and hand it to her?
Well, but Jeff pranks her by getting another guy to hand her the towel, and that freaks her out. but she was more comfortable with Jeff doing it, though it would be the same thing, right? But it's interesting, her and Jeff's relationship. I mean, she's Susan Hayward and he's Robert Mitchum. She's hot. He's handsome. So you kind of do get their connection, but it is Hays Code after all. When Wes is becoming more and more hot shit, little girlies are coming around to him, and it's definitely looking like that Wes is cheating on the Susan Hayward character here.
Because he's also going and drinking alone when she's staying back. He's spending all this money on these like fancier suits. He starts riding bulls.
It really happens after he rides this bull that no one's been to the limit with. And throughout this movie, we're just waiting for that other shoe to drop where like Wes is going to get killed on this one. Wes is going to be permanently injured on this one. Something's going to happen to Wes on this one. He's going to ride Yo-Yo, this bull that no one's able to take to the limit. And we're like, oh, this is it. Wes is going to die. But no, Wes is really good at bull riding. He's really good at rodeo shit. He becomes the guy that masters Yo-Yo, and that's when he becomes like the rodeo celebrity. And this movie is pretty great in terms of just seeing rodeo shit. We explain how they managed to sneak in the rules of things, and the movie actually wants you to understand what these people are doing when they're bulldogging, calf roping, bull milking, bronc riding. I mean, they shot footage in multiple locations of actual rodeo, and a lot of time the camera's pulled back, so we have to accept that, oh, that's guy's Wes, right? And you know that they probably had to find, like, we saw this guy get bucked off a Bronco
wearing this color
in Colorado, so Arthur Kennedy, you need to wear this kind of shirt. But we're seeing dudes getting like fucking stomped by these broncs. We're seeing people getting gored by these bulls. We're seeing actual rodeo clowns doing their work and getting things done. And the way that footage overlaps into the story is actually really well done. And it only helps to make this environment more and more vivid.
It's beautiful. And then you get the other side of it, which is the wives in the stands, scared to death. There's one little wife who just gets crazy excited whenever her husband comes out. I'm sure they have great sex, but also probably fight like cats and dogs. It's very intense, their relationship. But she's just like in love with him and loves the rodeo life, right? But the rest of them are much more kind of realistic about it. We see her face in the stands with these women when they first say, oh, he's going to ride this bull. And the girls kind of like cling to her a little bit. You know, like they all kind of like comfort each other. The part I love the most is the community aspect of this. In films, the only thing I've seen that's close to this is that carnival type of life, like we saw in Nightmare Alley, those kind of things where you really see the same group of people traveling to all these places together, and there becomes this routine that you fall into where even if you're in a trailer, but that's your home, and people come over for coffee, and then you hitch it up and you drive to the next town and you do it all over again, and you kind of you see how they get into this like monotonous thing. There's these montages like you're talking about of him riding bulls and people getting knocked off things and women screaming and, just them living life to where it's just, you don't even know at a point how much time has passed until you do get to the point where she's going, haven't we made enough money yet?
Jeff McLeod and the Louise Merritt characters, she's always very honest with Jeff. And it seems like that often Jeff never takes her skepticism personal. In fact, a part of him completely understands where she's coming from.
I've thrown away the down payment for a dozen spreads of my own over a crap table. I had 18 great years, all by myself. Wes has got somebody traveling with him. If I'd have had somebody like you, it might have been a different story.
What would it have changed?
Maybe nothing. Maybe everything.
And without saying as much, you really get a feeling of the mutual respect that they learn to have with each other. Jeff does want Wes to pace himself. He doesn't want him to be riding bulls for big tournaments right out the gate. But Wes, because he becomes just a natural at this, he gets a big head about it. And their deal is that half of all the money he makes, he gives to Jeff, which makes Louise a little skeptical at first. But then she understands it because he really is providing something for them. And they're still making a lot of money, even when they split it down the middle.
And this is his way to stay in this world.
And Jeff, Jeff probably also has a plan to maybe go buy some of his old land back, right? But Wes he's Mr. Hotshot now. He's just running around with this younger woman. He doesn't give a damn. And he's essentially ignoring his wife for the fun life of buying everyone shots and losing money and crap. So, but she's right. Like, they've more than earned their money at this point. They could probably retire, just how good he is at doing all this shit. But he just, in the climactic moments of this, just straight up like leaves her behind to just go party without her. Like, he doesn't even want her around that much.
Yeah, there was this point where the guy that you were talking about, who was really messed up and his wife was really kind of bitter, he got really, really injured and died. Wes goes into her trailer to talk to her, and he's drunk. She's giving him coffee. You can tell that his wife thinks this could maybe be a turning point for him, like realize, I don't need to do this. But instead, he buys the trailer. He's buying into this life. So they're in this trailer, and she's saying to him, hey, we have enough money. We can quit now.
I ain't no hurry to go back digging post holes or scratch a living dirt farming. What's wrong with this life? Steak for dinner? Money in the bank? What's wrong with it?
Louise is right, Wes. You've got what you set out to get.
Did somebody ask you to stick your nose in this?
Fellow always said I had a big nose.
Well, I thought that's what we were rodeoing for. Come on, let's clear out of here and go back where we can breathe some clean air.
There's nothing wrong with the air here. All I smell is the money I went out there in the arena.
And you like the way it smells.
And you don't.
It stinks!
And on the way out, he's telling Jeff, like, you're just scabbing off of me. I don't need anything from you anymore, and just takes off. Jeff and Louise are just left there with each other, and they do have a genuine connection. But Jeff is also trying to encourage her to kind of go the distance. Like, Wes is pretty much far gone, but Jeff is still loves that guy, but he also genuinely cares about her. And she decides, you know what? I'm going to this fucking party.
Sure must be nice to have a wife that gets that mad about you. You make a good pot roast. Wow! You may not need that black lingerie after all.
So she goes and she puts on the black dress, and she comes out, and Jeff is essentially her date to this thing. And they go there, and she sees Wes. Wes walks right by her. He's like first pretending like she ain't even there. And then when that little girly that he's running around with.
Do you think this is a good idea?
Oh! Look at me!
Why, honey, you look just like a faucet. Doesn't she, Wes?
What did you come up here for? To start a fight?
I came up here to stop you from making a bigger fool out of yourself than you naturally are.
Thanks for telling me.
Get going. Go on, get out. This is my part. I'll come here.
Well, it's been a lovely party, and I've had a lovely time.
She, like, shoves this girl and gets up in her face, and Wes is like, what the hell are you doing out here anyway? And Jeff is trying to make peace here and try to get him to be respectful to his wife because he respects and cares for Wes's wife. But Wes is just like, you just wish you could do what I do, but you can't do it anymore. So essentially, he's like, you're living vicariously through me. You're just done. You're washed out. Louise and Jeff end up leaving.
Well, because Louise pours a drink over the girl's head, and it's the girl's house. It's her party. And so she says, you got to leave. And so she looks at Jeff and says, Jeff, we've been kicked out. And they leave together.
So they are standing outside of the hall together. And Jeff, I think he knows the answer.
When Wes first asked me to come into this, maybe I told myself that the money was making up my mind, but it wasn't. I was lying a little bit to myself. The only thing that kept me stringing along was you. Hope's a funny thing. You can have it even when there ain't no reason for it. Now you can tell me to shut up and move on, just like anybody that comes to your door and tries to sell you something you don't want. I'm just waiting to hear what the lady of the house has to say.
Jeff is at a point in his life that Louise wishes her husband was. And Jeff has made all the mistakes that Wes has made, but he's past it now. And he's smarter and he's wiser. And he's not even, he could spend, he's got just as much money as Wes. He could go play craps and drink and shit like that if he wanted to. But would rather hang out with Jeff's wife and console her and admire her than be around the old life that he loves so much. But Louise is like, she cares about him, but at the end of the day, she loves Wes.
And then he says to her,
"It's funny how the people you never figure ought to be together always are." All right, Mrs. Merritt, I'll go back and tell him. I made my pitch, the lady just didn't buy.
Back here after we close the joint, huh?
I do think I ought to kiss you just once, though, for all the times I won't.
and they kiss, and that's when the door to the apartment opens, and here comes fucking Wes and Blondie and the whole rest of the party. And they get in a fight.
I think it's Hays Code bullshit.
We didn't see it.
That we didn't see enough of that kiss.
Yeah.
And we kind of, it's like we saw it for like a half a second.
But it clipped straight to Wes and the girl.
That's definitely studio scared shit. And that's too bad, because that could have been a bigger moment there than what we got. I know it's not Nicholas Ray cutting away there. I know it's not.
No, it should have been a bigger moment. And then even in that moment, Wes didn't come over and punch Jeff. Jeff punched Wes.
Yeah.
And left him on the floor.
The next rodeo event, Wes is sobering up. He's a mess. But Jeff comes up, and what do you know? He signs up to be in the rodeo. And all his buddies, Booker and stuff, are like, and his daughter are like, hey, you haven't been training right. You're not in a position to do these events, but Jeff is not listening. And then that's the point where we realized what we thought was going to happen to Wes for half of this movie. It comes to the realization that the viewer is like, oh no, oh no, it's going to happen to Jeff. And Jeff does do well in a couple of events, but then he rides a bronc.
Jeff McLeod's in trouble.
And he's got his foot caught in the stirrup.
Getting a bull rolling. No, his foot gets caught in him. And he gets drugged, and the bull, I think, rolls on him. And so they pick up Jeff's body. Louise is, when she hears that Jeff's name, that's when she goes out, and she's just hoping that he's going to be okay.
Well, she had stopped watching Wes. She wasn't going to the rodeo anymore because she didn't want to watch Wes do it. So the little girl, Booker's daughter, comes and gets her and says, Jeff's going to ride. And she runs, like drops everything, runs. And you know in that moment, like she loves him. And when he gets taken into the room with the medic, she goes in after him, and they have this moment that is so tender and beautiful, where he's telling her, you know, I broke my last ribs, and the doctor says, you know, the rib is in his lung, and we know that immediately. Like, he's not just hurt, he's gonna die.
He's internally bleeding.
And they're holding hands, and she leans her head down, and they don't kiss, but they're touching, and it's just this moment.
He rolls his body over and kind of and pulls her into him, and then that's when he's gone. And so then Wes comes around.
I didn't cry when it happened in the movie, but I'm crying now.
And Wes comes around. The way it plays out, like Robert Mitchum, or Jeff, as played by Robert Mitchum, looks tough as fuck, because he's just kind of being his charming self while bleeding internally to death. Like, he would have to be in intense pain. So it does kind of represent him as a tough guy there. But yeah, as we talk about the implications of what that is that's actually killing him, it is quite tragic. Louise comes out, and Wes walks up because he does care for him. He was just a fucking drunk fool.
He already has his pack, though. He's not planning on riding.
Jeff's death is the impetus he needs to finally listen to his wife. So when they call Wes's name, Wes goes, pass. We're going home.
And then they start to walk away, and then Booker and his daughter call after and say, Wes, could you use some hands on the ranch?
Some ranch hands?
And they kind of look at each other and smile, and they're like, yeah, why not? Come on.
And so what's left of the folks go off to live as happily ever after as they can, though their buddy, coach, friend, and secret love, had to die, make all this settle in a nice place. So that is the Lusty Men, a very good movie, a deep cut. We found there's a Tubi version that must be like the 1mm edition of it that looked real rough. Just look up the Lusty Men 1952 full movie Internet Archive, and you'll find a nice clean re-release copy of it there, and I'll put a link in the show notes. If I can find an archive link to any movie, I'll put it in the show notes. And these older movies, you often can, so check that. But this movie is very good. I liked it quite a bit. I think if you balance out what the Hays Code takes away, but the boundaries that it still manages to push, and the informative aspect of the movie as well, and the fact that Susan Hayward looks hot as shit throughout this whole movie, I think I can fall to a 4.5.
That's what I was going to say.
So that is a 9. Top of the A's. Check it out, folks. Nicholas Ray's The Lusty Men, starring Robert Mitchum and Susan Hayward from 1952, is a 9, a A++, just under S tier. Almost made it. And it's as good as other movies, sharing that ranking with movies like Le Samurai, the Jean-Pierre Melville movie, Paths of Glory, the Stanley Kubrick movie, which, I mean, if you argue that any of these were S tiers, I wouldn't argue against you. That Obscure Object of Desire, Louis Buñuel, The Dirty Dozen, The Sword of Doom, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Perfect Blue. It's at least as good as those movies, if not better. Tomorrow, we go into another offbeat Western. What I love about The Lusty Men is that it is a contemporary Western that is unique and like a good curveball for Western fans. I highly recommend it. But apparently, the next movie is a unique Western in its own right. Johnny Guitar, starring Joan Crawford and Sterling Hayden. And I'm looking forward to that one. So come back tomorrow, and we will see you then.
Bye.
Thank you for watching The Projectors. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. We are available on YouTube and podcast. You can also support the show by liking, leaving comments, reviewing, sharing, and never questioning Bob when he claims that certain characters in movies are like autism. We love you. Goodbye.
You know the woman wants her cowboy like he wants his rodeo. Love line is a dozen bud, more of a Sunday crap. It's the white and the nose, the gold and the buckle you win the next go round. It's boot shafts, it's cowboy hats, it's spurs and let it go. It's ropes and a rain.